My wife and I have been married for just over 2 decades, and I'm currently 40 years old. We're quite content and have 2 teenage children, Darcy, who is 17, and David, who is 15. I completed my college education years ago, while Macy was finishing her final year when we got married. Professionally, I'm an engineering manager at a mid-sized firm, and Macy works as a legal assistant at a large law firm. Both of us lead an active lifestyle, hitting the gym for at least an hour several times a week, and we enjoy outdoor activities like hiking whenever we can. Our kids are thriving, they're well-adjusted, perform well academically, and are fairly popular at school. They, along with my wonderful wife, are the greatest joys in my life. I make it a point to attend all their games and performances, actively participating in their extracurriculars, helping with homework, and taking them on weekend hikes and camping trips. In my role as an engineering manager, I delegate tasks effectively to avoid working overtime or on weekends. Travel is limited to a couple of conferences each year. Macy occasionally works late on important cases, but it's not frequent. That's a general overview of our life, though things took a turn when a new lawyer named Brandon Howard joined Macy's firm. He was young, fit, confident, and somewhat solitary. I first met him at a work event where he flirted with Macy, who responded with some flirtation of her own. When I voiced my concerns, Macy dismissed them, insisting it was harmless. While she acknowledged my concerns, she didn't fully agree with my perspective. After a few days, things settled back into routine. Macy had been working on a major case for nearly 2 years, which was now concluding, leading her to work long hours. While she was fully dedicated to the case and made sure to check in every evening, the flirting between her and Brandon persisted and even grew more intense. After the case was settled, a senior partner rented a mountain cottage to celebrate, inviting everyone involved in the case along with their partners. We decided to leave our teenage children at home instead of with Macy's parents, knowing they could handle it responsibly. Arriving at the cottage on Friday evening, we settled in. Despite having to deal with Brandon's ongoing flirtation with Macy, the evening was enjoyable. I chose to socialize with Chuck and Lou, the cottage owners, and spent the evening with them after expressing my concerns to Macy. The next morning, I woke up to the aroma of coffee. Macy was still asleep, so I went to the kitchen in shorts and a t-shirt. Chuck and Lou were preparing breakfast, and I joined in to help. Besides Chuck and Lou, the group included Brandon and his colleague George, along with their spouses, and Katie with her husband James. When breakfast was nearly ready and I went to grab my plate, I noticed Brandon had taken the seat next to Macy. "Excuse me, but you're sitting in my seat," I said politely. "Oh dear," Macy replied, "we're right in the middle of a conversation. Could you sit over there, please? Just this once." "But honey, I was a bit busy helping. I was looking forward to the chance to sit and chat with my wife over breakfast." "It'll be fine just this once. After all, we can talk all the time, but I rarely get a chance to chat with my colleagues outside the office." I was genuinely stunned. I decided that in the end, I wasn't really hungry, so I picked up my plate and put it on the counter. Refilling my coffee cup, I went out to the back terrace and sat alone, reflecting on what had just happened. I remembered the expressions on a few other faces when it occurred. Something was going on here, and I had a distinct impression that I wouldn't be pleased with the outcome. Throughout the day, things didn't go as well. Macy spent most of her time with Brandon. The only time she truly spent with me was when we were engaging with other people. When we went hiking, she walked with Brandon. When we went swimming in the lake, she spent time with Brandon. I managed to remind her several times that she was my wife, not Brandon's girlfriend. She just laughed it off and said I was imagining things. By the time dinner was over, I was full to the brim. When we went out to the terrace to enjoy the evening and have a drink, I timed it perfectly. My wife had just sat down, and when Brandon started to sit next to her, I shifted and nudged him with my hip as I sat down. Macy was displeased. She shot me one of her irritated looks. I just smiled back and took her hand. She tried to pull it away, but I held on tighter, refusing to let go. Instead, she almost refused to talk to me. It was a pretty uncomfortable couple of hours, as everyone else felt the tension. Finally, I had had enough. These weekends had turned into a complete disaster. I apologized, explaining that I was tired from the day's activities, and got up to go to bed. I went into the kitchen to freshen up my drink. My plan was to pack up before bedtime so that I wouldn't be rushed the next morning before heading home. I was just screwing the lid onto the bourbon bottle when Macy walked in. "John, I need to talk to you for a minute before you go to bed." "Well, may I?" I'm partly surprised by this. We had the whole day to talk, but you preferred to chat with everyone else except me. In fact, you talked to Brandon almost non-stop, barely saying a word to your husband. At least she had the decency to blush. "Yes, well, you see, I need to explain this. It should be interesting. First of all, I need you to understand that I never cheated on you. Never. Judging by how you behaved this weekend, I'm not so sure about that." "That's true. Okay, we flirted a bit with Brandon, but that's it. He never really even touched me, except to help me overcome a few obstacles during our hike today. Now, as I said, I have been completely faithful to you, and I would never even think of cheating on you. But there are no buts about it. That's why I'm here talking to you now. I have to admit that there is a pretty strong attraction between me and Brandon. The flirting we engaged in led to some tension. That's why I need to tell you that I will spend the night with him. I needed to tell you and be honest so that it wouldn't be considered cheating. I'm not going to act behind your back. No. What I said, no. I won't allow it. I won't approve of it. If you go through with this, there will be terrible consequences. I will not stand for this. Listen, I've already made a decision about this. There's so much tension between us that I have to do this and see what it's all about. It's just one time, and then, when we get back home tomorrow, I'll be all yours again. No. What I said, no. I won't allow it. I won't approve of it. If you go through with this, there will be terrible consequences. I will not stand for this. Baby, if you really love me, you'll let me do this just once. Baby, if you really love me, you wouldn't even ask for it. John, I really need to do this. It's just one time, and then I'll come back and be completely faithful to you again. Macy, do you remember our wedding vows, especially the part about forsaking all others? Also, since you feel the need to break this vow that you voluntarily made before God and in front of all our friends and family, why should I believe this promise made quietly without witnesses? Okay, John, I see you're angry about this right now. I really need to do this, so we'll talk in the morning. We can discuss it on the way home tomorrow. With these words, she turned and went back outside. That's how easily 20 years of a happy marriage were flushed down the drain. She expected me to be a faithful husband and wait for her to fly back into my open arms the next morning. That's not how I operate. We discussed this several times. Not one of our friends cheated on their spouse and talked about it. We had no passes in the game of infidelity. Betrayal was a breach of the deal, and I don't care if she told me first. Cheating is not just acting behind someone else's back, the act of making love to someone else is betrayal. I poured my drink down the sink. I didn't need another one for what I was about to do. I went up to the room and packed all my things. I left Macy's things as they were, she could take care of her own stuff. Turning off the light in the room, I sat on the bed and waited. An hour passed before I heard everyone returning to the house and dispersing to their rooms. I waited another half hour to make sure everyone was either asleep or otherwise occupied. Taking my bag, I quietly left the room and closed the door. I managed to slip outside almost silently. Luckily, my car was parked farthest away. It was a fairly new car, so when I started it and pulled away, it was quiet. It was just after 2 a.m. when I pulled up to our house. I noticed the lights were on, so it was evident that at least one of the kids was still awake. Sighing, I got out, grabbed my bag, and walked inside. Of course, both kids were already up and watching a movie. "Hey Dad, what are you doing here already? I didn't think you'd be back before tomorrow. Darcy remarked. Yeah, where's Mom? Added David. Well, answering David's question will answer both of yours. Your mom is still at the cottage in bed with her new man. Yes, I shouldn't involve our kids in the personal affairs between their mom and me, but I thought being honest with them would prepare them for the upcoming changes. Okay, maybe I could have handled it more diplomatically, but at that moment I didn't feel much remorse. What do you mean, in bed with her new man? Is Mom really cheating on you? That's exactly what I mean. She backed me into a corner tonight and said she was going to sleep with someone else. I decided I didn't want to wait for that, so I packed up and came home. I let her man give her a ride home. I didn't think I'd have to wait for her. Nearby, we talked a bit more, and then I took my bag to the spare room. The next hour was spent moving all my things from the room we used to share to what would now be my room. Fortunately, the guest room was the second master bedroom with its own bathroom, and the bed was quite comfortable, too. Once everything was moved, I collapsed onto the bed and fell into an exhausted sleep. I woke up a few hours later to the ringing of my phone. Glancing at it, I noticed my wife was calling. I sent it to voicemail. Looking closer, I saw she had left half a dozen text messages, and this was her third call. Just out of curiosity, I read the messages and listened to the voicemails. The first ones were her curious questions about where I was and that breakfast was almost ready. Then they escalated into worry about where I was. The later ones were angry, demanding to know where I was and insisting I come get her and take her home. The last one informed me she had to ask someone else to drive her and that she'd be swearing at me as soon as she got home. Well, I was already awake, so I might as well get up and get ready for the new day. Hurricane Macy would arrive in about 4 hours, and I needed to brace for the storm. I had a feeling she'd be furious. In the last message she left, there was no sign of remorse. I got up, took a shower, got dressed, and headed downstairs for breakfast. By the time I finished eating, the kids were already up. I explained to them that they might want to stay out of the crossfire as their mom wasn't in a very good mood. Surprisingly, they just laughed it off. I had a bad feeling about what would happen when she got home. They, it seemed, weren't too thrilled about what she had done. Where have you been? The slamming door announced the arrival of Miss Congeniality. Sorry, I just couldn't help myself, she said, laying it all out there like a low blow. I swung and tossed it over the fence. I really didn't think a human face could have such a dark shade of red. Oops, sorry, now it's turning purple. I was just about to pull out my phone to call an ambulance in case she was having a stroke when an explosion rang out. What was the idea of leaving me there in that state? Do you have any idea how humiliating it was for me this morning when everyone found out you left and I had to beg for a ride home? I was planning to drag you into bed today, but now you can just forget about it. I simply smiled back at her. I was actually impressed by the self-control she was demonstrating. First of all, dear, I don't care how humiliating you find this. Trust me, it was nowhere near as humiliating for me as when you jumped into bed with that guy and everyone knew about it. Secondly, I have absolutely no interest in ever sleeping with you again. You're damaged goods now. How can you talk to me like this? I'm your wife. No, it's not like that. Well, maybe on paper you still are, but in reality, my wife disappeared somewhere yesterday. What are you talking about? We discussed this last night. I told you in advance so I wasn't deceiving you. Okay, let me ask you a couple of questions first. Last night, did you sleep with someone who wasn't your husband? Yes, I told you I was going to bed with Brandon. Second, did you let it happen? Of course I did. Why do you think I went to bed with him? All right then. Since you allowed this to happen with someone other than your husband, you cheated. End of story. It doesn't matter if you told me about it or not. In fact, you didn't even ask. You said you had already made the decision and that I had no right to a voice. I even told you not to do it. I said I was vehemently against it. You just went ahead and did it anyway. But if you really love me, you'll let me. If you really love me, we can overcome this. If you really loved me, you wouldn't have even thought about sleeping with that guy." With these words, I turned and headed to the garage to work on my car. For the next few months, Macy tried to talk to me, but I wasn't interested. She also attempted to enter my room late at night several times. I changed the locks, and she didn't have a key. We were now just platonic housemates who happened to have 2 kids together. Why didn't I just divorce her? The kids. I didn't want to be just a part-time dad. I loved my kids and wanted to be there for them. Plus, I had only 3 years left until David graduated and went to college. Macy tried to involve the kids to get me to talk to her, but it didn't work out well. The kids were seriously upset about what she had done. She tried to turn them against me, but it was Darcy who set her straight. "Mom, Dad never said anything bad about you to us. You, on the other hand, complained about him several times. Don't blame Dad for turning against you, you did that yourself." Yes, in the Hopper family, there were some tough times. For months later, Macy started wearing very little around the house when the kids weren't around. She began wearing very attractive clothing to try to lure me into bed, or her bed, whatever worked for me. I must admit, sometimes it was difficult to resist. After all, she was a very attractive woman. However, I was determined. I just couldn't get past the fact that she willingly humiliated me in front of her colleagues. 6 months had passed since that night. "I can't take it anymore, John," she said, dressed in a sheer black negligee. "I need you. I want you. I'm begging you. Please take me upstairs and do it. I can't endure this any longer. So, if you're not going to take me, I'll go find someone else who will. I told you last week that I would if you refused. This is your last chance. Please don't make me go out that door." "You look very lovely," I replied. "I have no doubt you'll find someone to spend the night with. Just be prepared, because if you do, I'll consider it your permission for me to do the same." "John, this is not what I want. I willingly offer myself to you, but you keep refusing me. I don't want to sleep with other people. I'm sure I don't want you sleeping with other women. You're pushing me to this. It's not the same thing if I'm no longer needed by you. Why don't you just divorce me? Do you want this? Do you want me to divorce you?" "No, I want you to take me back as your devoted wife. You weren't very devoted to me in the cabin, so why should I expect you to be devoted to me now? Because I promised to be, and a little over 20 years ago, you vowed to be the same. Fine. If that's how it's going to be, don't expect all right. If that's your choice, then I'll start negotiating with a couple of ladies who have shown quite explicit interest in me. You're the one forcing this. If you go and take another woman, I'll divorce you so fast you won't even realize what hit you. I'll get the house, the kids, and more than half of the assets. You'll end up living in a 1-bedroom apartment and dining on top-notch ramen because of all the child support and spousal maintenance you'll have to pay. Then, just to spite you, I'll also interfere with your visits. Good luck with that. You do realize the kids are old enough to decide which parent they want to live with, right? Want to bet on who that will be? Go ahead. Go ahead and go somewhere and have fun. I really don't care." She cried again. "What do you want from me? How long are you going to punish me? What can I do to make you love me again?" She sobbed. "You absolutely can't do anything. You've already done it once and done. You were with another man and humiliated me in front of your friends. As for what I want from you, I want to coexist in this house as roommates for the next 3 years. Once David turns 18, finishes high school, and goes to college, we'll divorce and go our separate ways. Until then, we'll live in the same house and raise our children together. If you want to divorce me before that, go ahead. I can't stop you. Just keep in mind that the kids will probably want to live with me. That means I'll stay here in the house, and you'll be paying child support. John, I just can't trust you anymore. I can't live with the thought that my wife is with someone else every time she's not at home. I can't live with the thought of the next time you'll break your promise. There are only 2 options for me. Divorce you now, and then we'll both be part-time working parents. Live in the same house where we'll both have freedom, but the kids will have a household with 2 parents. We'll live in the same house, but we'll be divorced in every way except on paper. You're free to date as much as you want, just like me. We just won't bring anyone home. She really went all out that evening after washing up and putting on makeup. As promised, I also started dating other women. After a month, she seemed to resign herself to her fate. We were polite to each other and practically lived as platonic roommates while raising the children. We behaved like a family. When one of us had a party, we usually went together. We had to keep up this farce in public. Of course, it didn't take long for all our colleagues to figure out what was happening. I dated a few single women in my office, just like she did with some guys she worked with. Yes, she constantly tried to lure me into her bed, but I mostly refused. Okay, sure, a couple of times I gave in. She was still a beautiful woman, and after a couple of drinks, I let my head make the decision. So is that all? Macy asked with tears in her eyes. That's all, I replied, loading another box into my truck. Thank you for 20 wonderful years, Macy. It was 23 years ago, she said. I know, I replied. Tears filled her eyes again. A little over 3 years had passed. David had just moved into his college dorm, and Darcy was about to start her first year at university. The house was sold, and we were packing up to move. We were going our separate ways. The divorce had already started, and we were just waiting for the time to finalize the decision. Assets were split in half, and the kids' college accounts were fully funded. I still love you, you know, she whispered. I know. I'm sorry. Me too. She turned to look at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. Will you sometimes call me? Come see me sometimes. Maybe we can meet occasionally. Please, no commitments, just to see each other. My hatred for what she did had long dissipated. I no longer felt the same love, but I didn't despise her either. In fact, I saw her as something like a friend. Plus, we were still connected through the children. Of course we can do that. Besides, we'll have the kids' birthdays, graduations, weddings, and grandchildren's births to attend together. The kids forgave Macy for what she did. Their relationship improved, but never returned to what it was before. Macy bought a small 3-bedroom apartment so the kids could visit her when they came to town. I bought a small house with a couple of acres of land and a workshop. It was a pretty small town, so we still occasionally ran into each other. I called her, and she called me. We even went out together a few times. No, we never had a chance to reconcile, though she tried. Each of us dated quite often. Eventually, she had a few fairly long-term relationships. I was just content with not being married. I decided I had had enough of exclusivity. For me, there are 2 reasons to be married. The first is to have and raise children. I had already done that and was too old to do it again. The other reason was to grow old together and have a companion in old age. It didn't really matter to me. I had plenty of friends and family if I got lonely. John, I have a very big request for you. I'll understand if you don't want to do this, but I would really appreciate it if you at least thought about it. We were having lunch at a nice restaurant. It had been 5 years since the divorce. Just ask straight away. I assumed you needed something when you invited me to lunch today. By the way, where's your boyfriend? Won't he be jealous that you invited your ex-husband to lunch? She smiled. No, he knows all about our past. He knows he has nothing to worry about. Besides, he suggested that I ask you alone. He thought it might be more uncomfortable if you were here. However, he's ready to answer your call if you want to make sure he agrees with this request. Okay, so do you still love him? Have you truly moved on from our relationship? I'll never fully forget us, John, but I've come to terms with it. As for Martin, I'm comfortable with him and deeply love him. We're very happy together, and I'm committed to spending the rest of my life with him. All right, what do you need from me? If it's my blessing, you already have it, though you don't really need it. I don't have any say in this. Actually, that's partly true, but what I really want is for you to walk me down the aisle and give me away at my wedding. I was stunned. What? You want me to walk you down the aisle and give you away? Macy, most ex-wives wouldn't even want their ex-husbands at their new weddings, let alone involved in the ceremony. I know. So why do you think this is a good idea? Listen, I've talked it over with Martin, and he's fine with it. I was taken aback when she explained her reasoning, but I saw some logic in it. In a peculiar way, John, you were the most important man in my life besides my father, who's no longer with us. You were my last significant relationship. I could ask David to give me away, but it feels wrong for my son to do that. It's as if I belong to him. It seems a bit strange. You held my heart for most of my adult life, and since Martin and I believe it's fitting for the last man who had it to pass it to the new man, we thought this would be symbolic. Even if you still have a piece of my heart, it would be meaningful to show that you're letting go and passing it on to someone who will cherish it. It signifies that we're still friends, that our love is over, and that my new husband is taking over. Yes, it sounds odd to me too. I even called Martin and met him that evening for drinks at the local bar. He was initially skeptical, but after hearing Macy's reasoning and discussing it, he agreed it was a good idea. I wasn't entirely convinced, it felt strange. I also talked to my kids to get their thoughts. The idea of her family and ex-husband being involved in giving her away seemed wrong on several levels. But it's what she wanted. It worked out, and it felt like our relationship had truly ended and her new relationship was official. There were some comments, but they were mostly positive. It definitely made the reception lively. A few women approached me, asking if I was interested in starting a new relationship now that I've moved on from my past. There might be a few who are interested. We'll see. At least my weekends should be more interesting for the next month or two.